Well, during the Democratic debate last night, Joe Biden made a remarkable claim about the level of gun violence in this country. Watch.
150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam, from that point on.
Vietnam? More than that, 150 million? That's almost half the country. Dead in 10 years. That's a lot of empty buildings. Presumably, Biden meant to say 150,000. That's roughly the number of gun homicides in this country during that period. But Democrats are doing their best to drive that number up. How? By attacking police and letting criminals, real criminals, go free. Instead of fighting gun violence by fighting actual criminals, they're trying to destroy the NRA and take guns from people who didn't vote for them with assault weapons bans. Do assault weapons bans work? Well, there's just been a big study on this question from Johns Hopkins. The party of science is ignoring it, but the answer is no. They don't work. Not that they'll stop trying to push them on you. Colion Noir is a Second Amendment advocate. He joins us tonight. Thanks so much for coming on. Have you noticed there seems to be a connection between the vehemence of gun control advocates and their lack of knowledge about firearms? I mean, some of these people, Biden is a perfect example, don't know what, and the round comes out of. They don't know what a muzzle is, and yet they're sort of posing as experts. Am I imagining this?
No, you're not imagining it. That's exactly what they're doing. And to me, that's the most disheartening aspect of this. We're talking about one of the most important constitutional rights in this country, but yet these individuals who are calling themselves leaders don't know the first thing about the subject they're talking about. They just get their talking points, get in front of the camera, and then spew a bunch of misinformation to millions of people, and then the people believe it.
So what's interesting is that the same people who lecture you constantly about science and climate change and look at the data assiduously ignore the data when it conflicts with their social engineering. So Johns Hopkins, which I think is a legitimate institution, or was anyway, has a new study showing that assault weapons bans do not, or there's no evidence to show that they do reduce mass shootings. So this would, and a lot of studies have shown this, including the federal government's own study during the Clinton administration. Why is this not kind of death for assault weapons bans? They don't work. So why are we still pushing them?
Well, because agenda. At the end of the day, and I always go back to this point because it's their overall goal, which is control. They don't really care about what the facts actually say. What they want is to restrict the Second Amendment into oblivion. That's their goal. And at this point in time, from what we've seen from all of the candidates have been on stage talking about the Second Amendment and gun control, so forth and so on, and people talking about confiscating weapons, at this point, we should all understand that they have an agenda to restrict the Second Amendment into oblivion. This isn't about saving lives. This isn't about trying to find a balance and have a conversation, because if it was, they wouldn't be talking about how they beat or destroyed the NRA. They'd be talking about, okay, well, how do we balance protecting people's rights while trying to save lives in some manner that makes sense and that's actually plausible without taking away people's constitutional rights that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not willing to give up for the sake of saying, you know what, I do feel a little bit safer when I'm not actually safer. And so that's the problem with this conversation as a whole. They really don't care. What they care about is gaining control.
Yeah, controlling the population. An armed population is hard to control. And by the way, if they cared about gun violence, they would focus their efforts in places where gun violence is the biggest problem. But of course, they're against that, which tells you everything. Colion Noir, it's great to see you. Please finish up. No, put a bow on it.
Gotcha. So for them, it's too multifaceted for them. They don't actually want to do work. They don't actually want to roll their sleeves up and get the job done, because when you talk about the places that have the most gun violence, it's a socioeconomic issue. It's not a gun issue, because if it were a gun issue, we'd see this violence widespread across the country. We don't. It's concentrated in very specific areas, and there's a pattern to all of these areas that are not being addressed. But that would require them to actually care and actually do work.
No, it's true.
They'll go into these places, and they'll say, oh, we'll give you gun control, and then leave and never show up again after election.
If someone's trying to make you powerless and helpless, you should be nervous. That's a sign. That's not a good sign, I don't think, at all.
Not a good sign at all.
Great to see you. Thank you for that.
Right now, there's a culture war against the Second Amendment, which is why I need your help spreading our message to counter their message. You can do this by leaving a comment, sharing this video, and click the bell and subscribe button. Let my voice be your voice, and let them know you want to keep America tactical. Because the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive.
Also, if you're wondering where to get your I will not comply, I lost all of my guns in a boating accident, the AR-15 is protected by the Second Amendment, and your state-specific Keep America tactical shirts, click the links in the description section of this video.